This is my Yokomo 92 Works YZ10, and I just finished a restoration project on this. So as I mentioned in a recent YZ10 video, I have several YZ10 projects going on. I just finished my 91 YZ10 restoration or overhaul. I posted a video of that you can take a look at. This is the 92 YZ10, okay, and I picked this up recently. And for this one, I didn't do anything flashy like, Fiberlight parts or anything like that. I just wanted to do a basic cleanup and a few little flashy bits here and there, but nothing too fancy. So a lot of these parts were just cleaned up and freshened up, if you will. Some parts are new and packaged, like the pink wheels and the suspension arms, and I think this belt is new, but this is a tough racing belt. It's not an original Yokomo belt. Most everything else has just been cleaned. So the distinguishing features between the 92 and the 91 Works is that the 92 Works is the first to use the newer style rear hub carriers. Maybe a little difficult to see, but this hub carrier on the 92 is also used on the 93 Works and the 94 YZ10 and every YZ10 after that, until the MX4 was made. So that's one feature. The other feature that most people care about is that the 92 YZ10 went back to the 3mm pitch belts. The 2mm pitch belts that were used on the 91 are supposed to be smoother and more efficient, and at the time that these cars were driven in the early 90s, we did not have LiPo batteries. We had nickel cadmium batteries. Nickel metal hydride wasn't even out yet at that time, so the battery capacity was not very high. It was around 1200 milliamp hours, maybe 1700 milliamp hours if you had a really good pack. So to run a 4-minute or 5-minute heat would use most or all of the entire battery. So you wanted to minimize drivetrain loss wherever possible, and the 91 Works use 2mm fine pitch belts. Now the problem with that is, even though you get a little bit more efficiency than the 3mm pitch belts, it's very, very difficult to tune the belt tension to be just the right value, because the pitch itself it's not just the pitch that's smaller, it's also that the teeth on those fine pitch belts that were also shallower. Okay, so if you were just a little bit too tight or too loose on the belt tension, you could destroy the belt. So for the 92, they went back to 3mm pitch belts, a lot easier to tune and much more robust and reliable. Let's see. Some of the things I did here, the motor mount is a magnesium motor mount, standard on all YZ10s. This particular one I actually got from one of my 93 YZ10s, or the 93 Works YZ10. I have several of those. This one looked like it was bead blasted, so it looks very nice. I figured I'd put it on this as a shelfer because I am building a 93 Works runner. I'll make a video of that soon, and I didn't want to use such a nice part for the motor mount on that runner. Also on the motor mount here, you can see I added a TCS unit for a traction control system. It's just a slipper clutch unit. The 92 did not come with a TCS unit. It came with a fixed drive hub here that the spur gear just screwed onto. But I have a spare TCS unit, and I wanted to put it on here. And what I found was specific to this upper deck. This upper deck is the same upper deck that you'll also see on the 91 Works. Okay, if you just mount this lay shaft with the bearings where they're supposed to be on either side of the lay shaft on the motor mount, let's see if I can get the right lighting here. The inside slipper plate actually rubs up against the outer wall of the upper deck when you tighten down the nut for the spring nut for the slipper clutch. Okay, if you make it too tight, basically what happens is it puts leftward pressure on the lay shaft, and if we turn this around, let's see if I can get the focus right. There's a little washer piece here that basically holds the outer bearing in place The washer piece, it's relatively high tension, but you can still slide it around on the lay shaft. So the pressure that comes in from this side ends up pressing through this little spacer and basically pushes the lay shaft inwards, and then the slipper clutch ends up grinding up against the top deck. So what I had to do was basically fill the open space in this lay shaft here with material to prevent the tightening of the slipper clutch from pushing the lay shaft in. So really I just took an aluminum spacer here. I think it's like a 2mm spacer and a bearing, and it was, those two combined were just thick enough to basically hold the lay shaft in place while I was tightening this nut down, and I just barely get enough clearance between the top deck here and the inner slipper plate. Okay, so if you have a TCS unit and you want to put it on 91 works or 92 works because they have the same upper deck, you might want to consider, just keep this in mind if you want to do that. Okay, it's not a direct port to put that slipper clutch on there. Let's see, other things that I did that are sort of not stock. I have a black battery post here from, I think it was a 93 works. I just figured it would look nice with this theme here. The original white posts that I had, actually, the real reason I did it, the white posts were discolored, so I just figured I'd put black ones on there. This steering rack, I don't know who made it. It's a gold anodized aluminum rack. It might be a GPM part from way back in the day. Like everything else with the chassis when I got it, it was a bit dirty, so I just cleaned it up and remounted it. The only issue I ran into was that the inner link ball stud mounting point and the outer steering link ball stud mounting point, these are very close together. So the type of ball cups that you use are important, because if you use one big ball cup here and one big one here, like for example, say the RPM ball cups, they'll rub against each other and you won't get smooth action. So I ended up using a Lunsford ball cup for the steering link and the stock smaller white Yokomo ball cup for the inner link here, and it seems to work just fine. Let's see, the other little swizzle that I applied to this has to do with the shocks, and I actually did two things here. So these are, the shocks themselves are the standard, let's see if I can get a better image here, the standard Works shocks for the Works YZ10. So black body, and the shock seal arrangement in here is an O-ring, a Teflon bushing, an O-ring, and then another Teflon bushing. Or maybe, well, I think the outer one's Teflon, the inner one's plastic. Anyway, it's similar to the old Associated shocks, except there's one less bushing in there. But it's still a pretty good seal. Now, what I decided to do, because the original shock shafts were scratched and worn, is to replace them with Associated tinitride coated shock shafts, because of the color, they're gold colored, and I thought it would look very nice with this gold steering rack here, and also all the ball studs I have here are the original gold colored ball studs. Okay, so I figured it would go nice with the theme. The thing is, the Associated shock shafts are 3mm diameter, and I think the original Yokomo ones are a slightly smaller diameter. Now, the O-rings that are used in the shock seal are the exact same O-rings. You can take standard Associated 3mm O-rings, throw them in here, they'll work fine. Which is kind of interesting because, again, different diameter shock shaft, same exact O-rings. The problem I ran into when using these tinitride coated shock shafts was the two plastic, well, one plastic, one Teflon bushing that goes in the shock seal. It's the inner diameter is a little too small for the shock shaft, so you get a lot of friction. So what I did was take a 3mm drill bit and by hand, not with a Dremel or anything, just by hand, bore out the inner hole of those two bushings until the inner diameter of that bushing was just large enough to smoothly fit this shock shaft through it. Then I put the whole assembly back together and it works just fine. One thing that was a bit of a pain on these old Yokomo shocks, actually, got one right here, is there's a little C-clip there at the bottom of the shock that holds all the seal arrangements in place. So to take the seal out, you have to get that C-clip out of there, and it's a bit of a pain if you don't have small, strong tweezers, which I don't have. I had to play other tricks to get that out there, but It's not like the old associated shocks where you get this little plastic tube and you just kind of slide out a clip that's on the inside of the shock body to get the seal arrangement out. Here the seals load in from the bottom, and then you put a little clip on the bottom here to hold everything in place. So rebuilding the Yokomo Works shock is a bit more tedious than rebuilding standard associated shock. Okay. The other thing I did, you'll notice I have white springs here. The original Works springs, let me just get them out here. They're gray or silver, right? These are like the ones I put on my 91 Works if you go back and look at that video. The problem is I don't have enough of these, especially the front ones, that aren't rusted out. And I did try to take some Brillo pad, like this guy, a Scotch-Brite pad, or a Dremel, and just try to, grind out the rust, but then you get inconsistency in the glimmer or the shine of this silver. So I figured, okay, let me see what I can do about other springs. I do have some leftover Tamiya springs from the aeration buggy damper set that I put on my Top Force. If you go way back in my video history, I did a Top Force build or conversion, and I talked about using the Tamiya aeration buggy damper set, and I believe they came with these white springs. These springs are the exact same diameter as these old Yokomo springs. And this is important to point out because the the standard bore team associated springs, which are, commonly used, are a slightly smaller diameter than these Yokomo springs. Now you can get the associated springs to fit on a Works, on a YZ10 shock, which is exactly what you have here. Works shock, red associated spring. You just have to stretch it out a little bit to fit onto the bottom spring cup, but you will get a little bit more rubbing against the shock body. So I wanted to find a spring that was the appropriate diameter, and sure enough, those particular Tamiya white springs are the exact same diameter as these older Yokomo springs. And I think the white looks pretty nice with this color scheme here, so I'm fairly satisfied with it. Let's see, the pink rims here are the, I forgot the part number, but the size of the rim is a 2.15 inch rim. These are the roar regulation Yokomo rims, and back in the day, the roar regulation was 2.15 inches was the maximum wheel diameter, not 2.2 inches. And so on the actual package for these wheels, it'll say something like roar regulation wheels or something like that. So you can fit 2.2 inch tires on it, so you can put modern tires on it. You can either just do it directly and just, make sure whatever gap there is, you're sufficiently closing that gap with a rubber band or something when you glue the rims. Or the old trick that people would play, because again, in the early 90s, people didn't really glue tires to the rim. What they could do is put a rubber band on the inside sort of canyons here, and that took up the slack between a 2.2 inch tire and a 2.15 inch wheel. So eventually I mount tires on this. I got some Schumacher mini pin front and rear tires coming in the mail from A Main Hobbies. So I'll put those on there in time. I do have a body that I need to clean up. It's pre-painted from a previous owner. I just think the colors go so nicely with this that I don't need to paint a new body and a wing, and this will be done. So that's my 92 Works for this, and I have the 91 Works that I showed you guys recently, and I will be making a 93 Works runner video soon. So I'm quite pleased to say I have the full Works collection here, and I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions or anything about any of the Works models, I'll do my best to answer them. By the way, another difference, I had actually mentioned this before in other videos, between the 91 and 92 Works is the shape of the shock towers. Again, the 91 Works shock tower in the rear is flat here at the top. The 92 tapers down like this. And in the front, the 92 Works has this concavity in the sidewall of the shock tower. The 91 is convex. Okay, so those are some ways to tell the difference between the 91 and the 92. At a glance, they look very similar. Check the shock towers, the rear hub carrier, and the pitch on the belts, and those are your telltale signs about which one you have. Okay, so thanks for watching.